welcome back to Odylia Therapeutics Bridge Solutions video series. My name is Catherine Post, and I'm a scientist with Odylia. Odylia is a nonprofit biotech developing therapies for rare diseases. As a nonprofit, we spend a lot of time fundraising, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can support other rare disease patient advocacy groups in their efforts for fundraising. To this end, I sat down today to talk with our Director of Development, Heather Greene, and her experience fundraising. All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm here with Heather Greene, who's our Director of Development, to talk about fundraising and how to do it and tools to help get everyone started. So I guess to start, Heather, I'd like to ask you, how do you start fundraising for rare disease drug development?
That's a very good question. Patient advocacy groups come together and need to first decide what they want to raise money for. The number one question is, how are you going to use my money? So as a group, they need to agree on what the goal is, what the dollar amount is they're trying to raise, the time frame by what day, and specifically what that money will be used for. There's a trend, growing focus on transparency, especially with people raising money for nonprofits or charitable activities. So it's very important to be able to tell the donors what you're using the money for, where it's going to go, how it's going to be spent, so that they can feel comfortable donating the money.
So do groups need to get some kind of charitable status, like 501c3 status, in order to start fundraising?
No. They do not have to get the IRS tax charitable designation, which is called 501c3. They certainly would want to pursue that eventually, but to get started, they do not. There are a few options for raising money before you get that status. Something like a crowdfunding campaign. A popular one that people mention a lot of times is GoFundMe. You could set up a page for your organization, talk about what you want to raise money for, how much you're trying to raise, and set that up and accept money, and then use that money for your intended purposes. The biggest difference between donating money in that way and with a 501c3 is that donations for the people who make the donation would not be tax deductible. They would just be a gift that they make to an organization. They can't receive anything in return for that, because then that would be considered a sale and you would have to pay sales tax, but it would just be a gift to your organization. They wouldn't get a charitable benefit for or tax deduction for it, and you can use that money for your intended purposes. So there are options to raise money to get started for your organization.
I see. And so maybe that's a good place to start, and then start a 501c3. How does that process work? Is that involved, or how do people do that?
It is involved, and the 501c3 designation is a federal IRS tax designation, and it means that you have created a board of directors, you have created bylaws, incorporated the organization, and submitted the paperwork to get approved to be a charity to the federal government. You also have to be approved within your state, and each state has its own guidelines around being recognized as a charitable organization. And so any group would need to visit their Secretary of State website. They all have pages on nonprofit organizations they're called nonprofit corporations, and how you get registered within the state as well. But it's a two-step process. You have to do federal as well as your local state organization.
Okay, and then so if you have a 501c3 status, that means people who donate can get tax benefits. Are there other benefits to being a 501c3?
There are many. Having that status is a requirement to ask for grant money usually. It's also sort of a gateway, if you will, to being able to use other software. So I mentioned GoFundMe earlier, and you can use that as a non-501c3. But once you get that designation, other options open up. Odylia Therapeutics uses a website called every.org, and it is only open to organizations that have active 501c3 status, but it is a portal to accept donations of all kinds. So credit card donations, but also wire transfers, cryptocurrency, donations from donor advised funds, and other PayPal, Venmo, it gives an organization a lot more options of ways to accept money. So you don't have to set up your own credit card acceptance program or go to the bank and, set up all of that stuff. You can use the every.org portal, for example, to accept that money. It's much cleaner and easy to track, and it gives you the list of the donors, their contact information if they weren't anonymous, and things like that. And you can only use software along those lines if you have that designation. So eventually, if depending on the goal of this organization, if it's a long-term, multi-year plan for what the patient group wants to achieve, then I would recommend having a goal of setting up the 501c3. It's a lot more paperwork to get it started, and then there is an annual registration that you have to complete, tax return, or there is paperwork that has to be done every year. It's certainly not arduous. It's just you do just have to make sure that you do it.
I see. And then are there kind of off of that, are there other tools? I know you mentioned every.org. Are there other tools that can help make collecting donations easier?
Yes, there are things like the PayPal Giving Fund, and there are actually several different platforms, and we'll put a link to several of them and send that out. But there are several others that you can only use if you have that. But it also, having the designation, 501c3 designation, does open doors to other sources of revenue. So I mentioned foundations, but there are several, like if you wanted to do a charity night at a local restaurant, or other fundraisers, many times they want you to give them a copy of your IRS letter designating you as a charity, because they're making a charitable contribution to the organization, and they need that sort of as their backup as well.
I see. That makes sense. And what are some, say, a group is just getting started, what are some ways that they can go about getting their community involved in their nonprofit?
Once they have a clear goal, and both of dollar amount, but also what the money will go for, it's a matter of talking to anyone and everyone that you know, and realizing, or I guess remembering, that a little bit from a lot of people will really make the difference. You don't have to feel like you need to go out and raise $10,000 right off the bat. $50, $100, $250 will add up to help you reach your goals, financial goals, as well as the program that you or activity that you want to get funded. So I think it's really important. I think sometimes I hear from folks that they get discouraged that, our whatever it is, yard sale or spaghetti dinner or whatever it is that they organized only raised $500 or $1,000, but that really will add up and make a big difference. So I think it's don't get discouraged, because those things also are introducing your organization and the goals, the work you're trying to accomplish, to new people. And the more people you tell, the more people they will talk to, and the wider your net will spread. So you can, in the long run, raise more money. So those are I think it's important to remember, it's fundraising and what we call friend raising, letting other folks know what you're doing. But there are as many fundraising ideas as there are people, car washes and bake sales and things like that. But the power of simply asking someone that if they'll support what you're doing, get a 2, 3, 4 sentence pitch that says, this is our organization, this is what we're working to fund. Can you support us? Or do you know somebody who can? And it's just talking to people and asking a lot of times. You don't have to do a big golf tournament. You certainly can. You can do a 5K or a golf tournament or um, a dinner, spaghetti dinners, pancake breakfasts, but you don't have to do a black tie gala. You can, but that isn't the only way to raise money. We have folks who do charity football, aka soccer, tournaments, and they get a bunch of teams that each pay a fee, and they get a field on a Saturday, and they do round robin, and the money goes to comes to Odylia. So, there are ways to do that. It kind of depends on the number of volunteers that you have. Some of our patient advocacy groups are spread out across the United States. So it's more what you can do in your community. Maybe everybody picks the same day that they host some sort of activity to spread awareness and raise funds, instead of having one big thing in one spot. There's many smaller things in several spots.
That makes sense. And when people are asking for that money, is it important to be really specific, or do you find if people are broad, do you see a difference, or it just kind of depends on who you're asking?
I think it needs to be transparent above all, that we're taking the money and 100% of this money will be used for a project. It doesn't have to be down to the nitty gritty of, $100 will be spent on this and 100 on that, but it has to be, it's going to be spent on research, or it's going to be spent on family support, or it's going to be spent on a conference, or creating a new animal model, or whatever it is that it is specifically going for. So that when you tell people, it helps them not only understand where the money's going, but feel good about where their money's going, because you as an organization have a plan for how it's going to be spent.
A lot of sense. I was wondering too, I know, and this is like something we think about as Odylia, and this is a very hard question, I know, but what are some ideas, or how do you think about getting people outside of your personal network interested in your cause? Have you, what, I know you've worked in the space for a long time. What are your sort of best ideas for helping do that?
It's important to communicate. So in a variety of ways, and as much as you can, but it doesn't need to be overwhelming. So you could get a website or get a web page. It can be one single page with information about your organization or the rare disease that you're trying to impact. And so that when people Google it, they have a place to go. It's pretty simple, can be simple and not involved to get that up. Having a Facebook page or an Instagram page, social media, even if you're not posting all of the time, again, when people search, that's where they're going to go to search about your organization and about the rare disease that you're trying to impact. So those can reach people outside of your network and are easy to share. You want to make it as easy and turnkey for people to donate, but also to share information about you. So if you have the ability to post things on social media and make them shareable, that is a good way to expand beyond your own network, because it gets posted, on other people's feeds and things like that. And then to network locally. There are many communities around the country have community foundations, or they have kind of what I would call clearinghouses, where many nonprofits come together to almost list their services or list their mission of what they're trying to do. So if somebody in the community wanted to find them, they could find them that way through usually it's through a county government or a United Way, community foundation, places like that. You want to get in touch with them to let them know what you're doing, partly because they might be able to have resources that they can give, but other people are coming to them to ask them if they know of anyone in that community doing these activities. So it's a good way to sort of old-fashioned get the word out about your organization, but specifically also ask people in your community to share the information that you put out. So it might seem second nature to you and I to talk about what we do and to share it with other people, but many times you have to specifically ask your next door neighbor or your best friend and say, can you share this with 2 people, and ask them to share it with more people. And that's how you can expand the network. It's not rocket science, but it is, you have to be very overt and be purposeful and specific, asking people what you need them to do.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me a bit about this. I know fundraising is difficult, and it's something we think a lot about at Odylia, but it's something that's, really important, and I appreciate all your feedback. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye. I hope that answered some of your questions on fundraising as a nonprofit. If you have additional questions, please feel free to ask them in the comment section down below. And please like and subscribe this video if you'd like to have access to our videos as soon as they become available. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.